Let's talk about how to sell more stuff on the podcast today with a couple of simple truths about sales. But before we dive in, let's have a quick word from one of the businesses that sponsored today's episode. Check out this quick ad. We'll be right back. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all of this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. All right, so today we're talking a little sales conversations. This is a common thread on the podcast. If you're listening today and you're a newer business and maybe you quit your 9-to-5 and you're thinking, hey, I started a business. Where's all the money? How do I make money now? What do I do? How do I, and I think this is something that is sometimes a little challenging for the newer business owner to understand is that, there is no, if you build it, they will come. I'll say that again. There is no, if you build it, they will come. That was one of the biggest mistakes that I made in business. I just truly thought, it's not really embarrassing, but it's kind of, trying to find the right word. Like, I'm embarrassed for myself when I think back to those days years ago when I thought, oh man, I'll start the business and I'm going to make all this money. It's going to be great. It's going to be so easy. It's going to be so easy. And I've come to find out this is a very common line of thinking. I've had so many conversations with newer business owners over the years, and more often than not, this is the approach that people have. It's, oh, what I'm selling is going to be amazing. It's so much better than the competitor. What I have is so great. People would be nuts not to buy it. And again, we're going to make so much money. We're going to make so much money. This could be so great. That's not the case. And like I said, the newer business owner is figuring that out very quickly. Those of you who are the savvy, long-term, you have survived whatever this world has thrown at you, whether that's COVID or a crazy economy or what have you. And by now you've learned, this thing's a full-time deal, and this ain't no 40-hour work week. This is grinding and working and, making it happen. And sales is a big part of that. So you have said yes to a full-time sales role. Congratulations. You are now in full-time sales, and your job is to drive revenue as best you can for your business. And this never changes. It changes eventually. Eventually you get to the point where, it's going to come and go in waves where you'll be surprised. There'll be so much repeat business. You'll have people referring you business that you won't have to be actively selling. And then you'll have times where you're just like, dude, are people, what's going on out here? I feel like I'm having to make so many phone calls. Like I'm having to work hard to keep the revenue coming, keep it going, keep the pipeline filled. And it's the feast or famine of business. It just happens. You're going to have phases of your business where you're like, dude, what do I do with all this money? Like I'm going to retire in 3 years. And then you're going to have times in your business that you're like, are we going to make it next month? Like, this is just nuts. So regardless of like the pacing of sales, who I want to speak to today is the person who you're trying to sell more. You're trying to make more money. You're thinking about, okay, what do I do to increase the bottom dollar amount going into my pocket at the end of the day? We're going to talk about it today. So we're going to talk about two things. One, we're going to talk about the importance of being seen And 2, we're going to talk about how to sell in a way that you can feel good about. And I do think both of these things are very important. I don't think it's enough to talk about just one of them, because I do think you need both to have a healthy business. And these are both things that I've had to learn the hard way. I mean, geez, really everything about my business is, hey, I learned this the hard way. And I think it's also what makes the podcast valuable. We don't, on social media, you get a lot of stories of, I quit my job and started this business, and oh my goodness, I can't believe I was making $40,000 last year and now I'm making 50 million. Like, that is the social media paradigm of just made up half truths, things that aren't realistic or real for many of us. So I think that's part of the value of the podcast, is we're going to have the real honest approach. And much of this, man, gosh, almost 90% of this is lived experience. It's what I've been through myself and had to deal with myself. So let's start with the art of being seen. There's no art to this. This is just very simple, and it's not sexy. I think that's one of the most important distinguishers about this advice, is that it is not sexy. There's no shiny button to it. There's no, oh, I've never thought of it that way. And frankly, I've worked with so many businesses. I've been involved in so many different industries and kinds of companies and businesses of all sizes, from small $60, $70, $80,000 businesses to $200 million businesses to, I think about the old consulting company that I used to be at, where we worked with Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson, billion, trillion dollar businesses. And what I will tell you is, regardless of who you are and what you're selling, 90% of business success is not sexy. It is not new. It is simply doing the work and being consistent. And I'll explain this in a very simple way. You understand this concept by thinking about your weight. Have you ever thought about your weight? And this is not, by the way, to make anyone self-conscious or, your spouse did not call me and say, mention this on the podcast. It's just something we can all relate with. It's like the New Year's resolution. It's at some point in your life, you've probably thought, I need to lose weight. Now, this has not been a mythical problem that needs deep work in research to figure out. The answer to losing weight is it's not that complicated. There's an element of exercise and going to the gym. There's an element of thinking about what you eat. And there's an element of what you drink and how much you sleep. And those three, now people who are like, let's be real. I'm not an aficionado on fitness. So I'm sure there's people out there who, you are yourself and you're like, no, there's actually these 18 other things. That's fine. But if we just boil it down, if someone came to me and said, man, I need to lose weight, what should I do? I would say, what are you eating? And are you going to the gym? Are you exercising? And if they said no to both of those, I would say, okay, well, you know what to do, right? But the thing that trips us up is that it is so dang difficult to do those things. We don't want to. We don't like to do those things. If I decide I'm not going to eat sweets or late night desserts or what have you, and then I'm driving home and I'm driving by Andy's and I think, oh man, what would hit the spot right now? Get a little cookie dough, get a little raspberry, get a little chocolate chip. I may be a little seasoned on the Andy's order. That's all I'm saying. It's our human nature. It's our human flesh. It's hard to do the things that we know we need to do. And that can be expanded to a lot of different places, getting up early, just personal habits that make a big difference in our life. Well, in business, there are some things that are very much true, yet they are not easy for many of us to do because we cannot stick to the consistent, unsexy things that work in business. And I see this unfortunately, in a handful of people that I've chatted with over the years of They're always trying something new in their business. They're always paying for something new. We're starting this big ad campaign. We're doing a billboard. And a lot of this really is marketing related because marketing can be such a great engine for sales. But I see people do this quite a bit where they are so energized about the latest. What are we doing with AI? I mean, I'm going to pay for this AI service and they're going to automate our leads. It's going to be incredible. There's nothing that is a silver bullet, and yet there is no shortage of people who will tell you about their silver bullet. And I mentioned this on the last podcast episode. This gets framed the same way almost every time. People will rip on tried and true, proven methods, and they will frame them as dated and old. I have a friend of mine who has come on the podcast, Todd Capone, incredible sales guy, amazing sales professional. And he calls himself a sales historian. And one of the most common things that he posts on his LinkedIn is old articles, news clippings, headlines from the 1900s, 1920s, 1940s. And I'm going to tell you something. The headlines back then are almost verbatim exactly what they are today in terms of just common things that people complain about or say that things are changing or things that don't work or what have you. Like the older you get, I think the more you realize that these things, how much more durable and really time agnostic some of these principles are in business. So I say this really to the younger business owner, younger in sense not of age, but in terms of like how long you've been running a business. Don't get swept up in the dazzle, in the sheen and shine, and the things. Oh man, this is going to just totally, and especially people who are ripping on. Oh, you do email marketing? Ugh, who opens an email anymore? Hey, let me tell you about that. And it's silly. It's silly. I mean, if you run a business, ask yourself, when's the last time you opened your email? You're probably going to say today or yesterday or the day before. People do email marketing because guess what? Works. It works, but it's not sexy. It's not exciting. And so people turn and look for the new greatest thing to entertain them. So all of that is the long-winded preface to this first piece of advice today. You got to be seen. You got to be seen. If you want to sell more stuff, you have to be seen. And I bring this up because there is no shortage of opportunities, of places to go, networking events, people to talk to, social media posts that you can make, what have you. And many people are not doing those things because it makes them what? Uncomfortable. It makes them comfortable. It stretches them. And so what happens is you hear about a networking event and someone says, "Oh yeah, you're going to have 60 seconds to talk about your." Oh geez, I don't want to talk about my. I don't want to get in front of people. I'm just not going to go. Or you wake up, the meeting's on a Wednesday morning. You wake up, you're not feeling good. You don't feel the pep in your step. I'll go next week. Like, and I don't want this podcast I don't want this to become like a self-help thing where it's like the art of motivation and momentum, but you can know you're in a battle against yourself. You are battling against yourself to stick to some of these tried and true principles. With that, some of the stuff may not be in your nature. But you got to find ways to get in front of people. Sometimes people tell me like, well, I don't even know what that would be. I don't even know where I would go, what I would do. I think if you really dug into it, you would be shocked how many things, how many events there are, how many opportunities there are to get in front of people. You also have a phone. Chances are you have a phone. You have a thing called the internet that you can also look up almost any business's address and phone number. But I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to have an awkward conversation. I don't want someone to be like, well, make me feel bad. Okay, then you will be broke forever. That sounds a little harsh. I feel like that I feel like that's a little bit too in the in the phrasing of some of these marketing bros. Do you want to be broke forever? Then don't do this. Yeah. So forgive me a little bit on that, but seriously, your business will never generate momentum on its own. It will never generate momentum. The people who think that are delusional, and they are misunderstanding that the random instances that you've heard about that happening are the exception, not the norm. A friend of mine started a web design business, and he called me like a week after he started it. I said, man, it's going to take a while. It's going to take some time. He called me a week after it started, and he said, yeah, dude, it's crazy. Switchfoot, from a friend of a friend of a friend, got a hold of me, and now I'm managing their website. Switchfoot, the band, the national band. Like, that's the exception, not the norm. You're not 90% of people, more than that, 95% of people are not going to get a random phone call one day of, hey, let's do some business together. And the people who are going to get that phone call, I mentioned the friend of the friend of the friend, are the people who have networked well and built up relationships. When you put out the Facebook post that says, hey, I'm starting this business doing X, and someone calls you the next day and says, hey, I heard you're starting a business. I need some help. They do that because you've nurtured relationships. If you don't show up, if you don't curate those relationships, curate those touch points, look for ways to get in front of people, you will not make it long term. Simply because it's an awareness problem. Not enough people know you do what you do. So if you feel like you're not getting enough opportunities, chances are you need to find ways to get in front of people, whatever that may be. I've done that in a variety of ways for my business. I have a Friday morning event that I tried to commit to going to every week. It's probably about every other week, 2 or 3 weeks a month. I have that. I have the podcast that I get into in front of as many people as I can. I have, I just totally blanked on what else I do. I have speaking gigs that I do. I have lots of networking, other networking events that I go to. I'll guest or sub at BNI meetings. I will, I have a networking group that I host on Tuesday mornings. I mean, I'm looking for so many ways to get in front of people so they can know who I am and they know what I do. Oh, and then I remember what I was going to say. I also, like 2 years ago, decided that I was going to post on LinkedIn every single day. And I've almost kept that. I'd say since my third child was born, I've been probably 3 days out of the week, maybe 4. But at my best, I have kept that commitment to myself. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, let's say you're getting enough opportunities. You're getting the phone calls. You're getting the people reaching out, but you're really struggling. You're struggling. You're not closing the deal. And I want to help reframe how you approach sales. And I'll just use the phrasing that my friend Wendy Kane with Wendy Kane Accounting, how she framed it to me. And I really like this. So I'm just going to verbatim reshare the way she's put it. Is she said, sales changed for me when I stopped thinking of it as selling and instead started thinking of it as serving. I love this. When you get in a sales conversation, take the pressure off yourself. Now, this is said kind of lightly because if you're starving for cash, you don't know how to pay your bills, there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of urgency. And I'm not ignorant of that. I've had those times in my own business, in my own life, where it's like, I got to close this sale. I have to close this sale. But what I will tell you is if you can resist indulging, and actually, I'll come back to that in a second. But if you can resist indulging in a fear-based mindset where you're like really trying to get the person to lock in and commit, people can really sense that. They can really feel that. And even someone who's pretty warm to buying from you, you will push them away if you are trying to strong arm them into a deal. But when you have a service-based mindset, instead of how do I close this deal, the conversation changes to how can I help? So I had someone call me for some podcast help the other day. I said, all right, how can I help? What are you looking for? What's the need? Or someone might call and say, man, I'm having a really hard time with my website. All right, how can I help? Tell me what I can do. And sometimes, you actually save yourself some time because you realize what that person thinks you do is not what you do. And so, someone might call and they'll say, hey, yeah, I need someone who can get me on billboards. Well, they'll say, I need to get more customers. Okay, how can I help? Well, yeah, I heard that you could help me get on billboards. Oh, nope, we don't do that. Okay, conversation done. You just saved yourself 30 minutes of your day. That's a whole other piece of the conversation too, by the way. It's just making sure every minute counts in your day and you're not wasting time. But having that approach of how can I help, being the expert, being the person who can guide them. I've had people who've called for SEO. I think I gave this example, a guy who runs an apparel company. It's a $20,000 a month apparel company. Very niche, very, very niche. And he said, hey, I need SEO. Looked at his website. Man, you don't need SEO. You don't. It's not going to help you. It's not going to move the needle. I mean, you can spend the money, but I don't think it's going to make a difference for you. See, I'm serving this person. I'm not trying to sell this person. If I was trying to sell the person and he said, hey, I need SEO. Okay, great. Let's get you started. Here's, I'm going to send you an invoice. I'm going to send you a contract. Let's get it done. Which if you're not connecting the dots, you may think, well, what's the problem with that? That person said that they wanted X and you sell X. So why not just close it right there? And the problem is because you're building something long-term, you're trying to and understand something about, this is a concept I've shared so much on the podcast over the years. You're trying to build repeat business because the intense amount of energy and effort that comes in the form of closing a customer and proving to the customer that what you sell, like, it's so substantial. It takes so much. I think about a consulting customer. It takes so much to close a consulting customer. Mainly because the dollar amount is so large. It's a several $1,000 investment. But it takes so much. So understanding that, it is to your long-term benefit to have a happy and delighted customer who you've delivered your services for, like you said you would, than it is to always chase brand new customers. So when the person says, hey, I need SEO, but they don't, you can close that deal, but you've just ruined any opportunity of future business from that person. And not just future business from that person, but also them referring business to you. There's no better referral than a happy customer. There's no better referral source than someone who loves what you do. My veterinarian, Stanley Animal Hospital, we love them. They're awesome. They're great. I met someone who worked there, and I said, "Hey, you're behind the counter. What do you think about the place? Like, tell me." And she was like, "It's the best place I've ever worked. Best job I've ever had. Love that place." Well, guess what? That makes me even more of an excited customer of this person, and it makes me quick to recommend them. Again, not an earth-shattering concept, not a sexy concept, but this is how it works in business. So when you're on that next sales conversation, instead of thinking, how do I close the deal? How do I close the deal? Think, okay, how can I help? And it doesn't have to be a secret that it's a sales conversation, by the way. Like sometimes when I'm in a sales conversation, like I was in a conversation with the guy last year, and he was asking me about Podcastable, podcast service. And I said, well, hey, are you asking because you're interested in podcasting, or are you asking because you think you want to hire us for your podcast? And he said, I think because I want to hire you. And I said, okay, great. Let's talk about it. What's going on? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to build? Let's get into the details. So like we framed we both know it's a sales conversation, but I've also led with, how can I help? so that that person can know, like, we're just talking. We're just having a conversation. Help me understand what you're trying to accomplish, and I'll tell you if I think I'm a good fit. And I'll be honest, if we just take it out of like 100% of all the sales conversations, I'd say 50% of them, this is just off the top of my head math. So if you hear this change down the road, because I probably thought about it more. Top of my head, I'd say 50% of conversations end in the first 5 minutes because we're getting on the same page. We're getting on the same page of what they actually want. Is that something I sell? We're getting on the same page of budget. Is that something that I can do at that price point? I had a referral that came in yesterday. I don't know why. It's kind of funny how these things happen. I don't actually usually get this many podcast referrals, but I had someone call me a couple days ago. They said, hey, I have a nonprofit that wants to do a podcast. And I just, as we were chatting, I just said, well, man, like unfortunately, I don't have the ability to just donate, time and effort. Like I'm not able to do that. We had that conversation right from the get-go. We're getting agreement on outcomes, the service to achieve that, and budget. And I do that in the first 5 minutes so that we don't waste time. And I usually frame it in a way that's respectful. I don't say, hey, let's cut to the chase. Do you have the money to pay me? It's hey, I want to make sure I use your time well and I respect your time well. And I want to make sure we're on the same page. So let's talk about the budget from the get-go. And I'm fully willing to explain why it costs what it does and all the elements included in that. But it costs X amount. Is that what you're willing to spend today? Or I was just in a conversation yesterday talking to someone they were saying they were having a tough time with their cash flow. And I threw out a $9,500 proposal. And I said, do you have the cash flow for that? Is that something that you're able to pay for? Or do we need to talk again in 6 months? And he said, no, we can do that. We can make that happen. Again, we had that from the get-go, chatting about, do we have agreement on this? So out of all my sales conversations, half of them are going to end almost immediately. An additional, probably 20 to 30%, I'd say probably another 20%, probably aren't going to close. And then the remaining, just for whatever reason, it's a tire kicker. They think they want it, but they actually don't. They said they wanted to spend the money, they actually don't. They're like what's the dog from Up? It's like chasing squirrels. They're always looking for the next thing. And, maybe they had over the top expectations of like, another podcast example. The gentleman I was talking to, who he said, yeah, well, how long till we go viral? Or that's going to, we're going to go viral with this, right? And I was like, no. Yeah, no, we just produce episodes. So that's which nothing against that individual for wanting that. It was just like, oh, okay, well, we're realizing that what we sell is not necessarily what you're looking for. You might be looking for like a social media manager or someone to handle your brand or what have you. So the remaining 20 to 30% will close. And that's just from being a normal person and having a normal conversation. But again, you have to actually, show up and have those conversations. If nobody knows you exist, it's not going to happen. So try those two things. Look for opportunities to get in front of people as much as possible. And don't just do it one time. Sometimes I hear from people, they're like, well, I tried it. I'm like, how did you try it? Like, well, I went to a meeting. I went to a networking event, this week. Okay, well, how many times did you go? Just once. It didn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, or like, I posted on LinkedIn. It didn't work. Well, how many times did you I posted once. Okay, well, there you go. So it's got to be something you're willing to commit to long term, but show up in front of people, whatever that is. And then as you get into sales conversations, think of it as serving, not as selling. And you'll be amazed how much your revenue grows. Hey, thanks for listening to the show today. I so appreciate it. If you're a first-time listener, what are you waiting on? Click the subscribe or follow button so you keep getting good advice wherever you are. Don't forget, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice, where you can support the podcast for as little as the price of a cup of coffee. Check it out, and we'll be back next week. See ya.